Satoshi Nakamoto envisioned a form of on-chain governance for Bitcoin where each user in the network would have decision-making power. Although it comes with significant risk, on-chain governance represents a powerful feature to harness the wisdom of the crowds and unlock the ultimate utility for cryptocurrency users. Satoshi acknowledged the need for a voting mechanism to decentralize the decision-making process and empower Bitcoin users with control over the direction of the network. The Bitcoin whitepaper provides us with key insight here and a reference point to evaluate the governance models of today to see how they compare to the one he described. What we're about to discuss is further evidence that Cardano listened to the early innovators in this space and is now attempting one of the most ambitious blockchain governance implementations industry-wide. Deliberate architecture born out of an undeniable vision, it poses the question, is this the most powerful blockchain adoption driving catalyst in play? Welcome back to Sapien, the channel for in-depth coverage and breakdowns of the most disruptive technology that's challenging the economic, political and social systems of the world. This video is brought to you in partnership with the Cardano fans Stakepool, who are the creators of the Cardano Blockchain Insights and Cardano DApp Analytics platforms. Our collaboration will spearhead a stream of Sapien content to further the reach of Cardano and its impressive technology. So if you find value in the content and want to help support this effort, please consider delegating to the Cardano Stakepool ticker, CRFA. Full details are linked in the video description. And massive thanks to all delegators, both myself and Cardano fans, really appreciate you all. So what exactly did Satoshi write about governance in the Bitcoin whitepaper? He states the proof of work also solves the problem of determining representation in majority decision making. If the majority were based on one IP address, one vote, it could be subverted by anyone able to allocate many IPs. Proof of work is essentially one CPU, one vote. The majority decision is represented by the longest chain, which has the greatest proof of work effort invested in it. So my first observation here is the one CPU, one vote references a form of on-chain voting whereby each user in the network holds decision-making power. At this stage, Satoshi assumed each Bitcoin holder would also be a miner or block producer, therefore having one CPU vote. However, this isn't how things have turned out in the Bitcoin network. Bitcoin holders and miners are today two completely different groups in terms of their level of participation and incentives. It's possible that Satoshi misjudged how the network would evolve. He certainly couldn't predict the introduction of ASIC miners and how this would impact decentralization and the centralization of power. Despite this, in the very origins of this industry, we have the pioneer of it all referencing the importance of user empowerment through a type of on-chain governance. What he mentions in his conclusions is as equally intriguing. Satoshi writes, they vote with their CPU power, expressing their acceptance of valid blocks by working on extending them and rejecting invalid blocks by refusing to work on them. Any needed rules and incentives can be enforced with this consensus mechanism. Many conclusions can be drawn from this statement. Specifically, any needed rules and incentives can be enforced with this consensus mechanism. This points to a system that values the ability to evolve through user participation via an on-chain voting mechanism, and achieving on-chain governance is a vital component for decentralization that hands the decision-making power to all participants, not a selected few. Without on-chain governance, you remove one of the most appealing value propositions, the ability for users to actually guide the direction and evolution of the entire system. It's the most egalitarian, ultra-inclusive approach that aligns with blockchain's founding principles. If our goal is to create an alternative financial and social operating system, should it not value all participants in the same way, provide them all a voice and a platform to contribute to meaningful change? On-chain governance fosters a decentralized, trustless and secure environment where network participants can influence the system's evolution directly by participating in the decision-making process through transparent and automated voting mechanisms that are most importantly publicly verifiable on the blockchain. By embedding governance rules into the blockchain, it ensures that changes such as protocol upgrades, parameter adjustments or treasury spends are implemented based on community consensus without relying on centralized authorities. This kind of decentralized collaboration and participation also captures the brainpower of an entire community rather than having to rely on project founders or a smaller group to come up with all the answers. It creates an environment for mass innovation and presents an extremely powerful mechanism for people to innovate and realize significant change. While it's true governance could make or break the network, it provides the key to unlocking the power of decentralized blockchain communities and is a fundamental component if you have aspirations of a network state. This is where I believe the most opportunity for mass adoption lies. If you entered the blockchain space because you value things like decentralization, ultra-inclusivity, and how these systems can facilitate a global collaborative effort to evolve, understanding the governance models of the blockchains you interact with should rank pretty highly on the do your own research agenda. It really is a question of which system you would prefer to participate in. But before we dive into the governance models of Bitcoin, Ethereum and Cardano, it's important to understand the difference between on-chain and off-chain governance. On-chain governance is a type of system where decisions about a blockchain network are made directly on the blockchain itself. This typically involves a mechanism where cryptocurrency holders can both propose and vote on changes to the network's rules or parameters. Off-chain governance is a more centralized approach where decisions are made outside of the blockchain, often by a small group of developers or stakeholders. While this can be more efficient, it also leads to a concentration of power and effectively reduces the network's overall level of decentralization. This type of governance stifles innovation and leaves the majority of the network's participants with no control over its continued evolution. Currently, Bitcoin doesn't have an on-chain voting mechanism. While it's true that miners can influence the direction of the network via hash rate voting, this isn't a direct on-chain voting process and importantly, doesn't enable all Bitcoin holders to participate. There is no formal mechanism for proposing and voting on specific changes. As a Bitcoin holder, you have no control in the final decision-making process of the protocol. Although there is a Bitcoin improvement proposal process which is similar to Cardano's SIPs and Ethereum's EIPs, in all instances these discussions take place off-chain. While they are freely proposed and discussed publicly, the final decision is determined by core developers and miners. Then it's down to core developers to implement the Bitcoin improvement proposal or accept it if someone else is implementing it. It then relies ultimately on the miners to accept or reject the change by including or excluding it in the blocks they mine. While it's still a collaborative process involving core developers, miners and other stakeholders in the community, ultimately hash rate voting cannot be considered as on-chain voting because it doesn't involve all Bitcoin holders through a formal on-chain voting process. The unforeseen rise of expensive ASIC miners has, in contrast to Satoshi's vision, prevented a significant portion of Bitcoin holders from having any meaningful decision-making power over the network. The fact remains, whether or not Bitcoin's governance model is what the wider community wants, it's centralized and fails to live up to the one Satoshi described in the whitepaper. Ethereum also shares an off-chain governance model that is similar to Bitcoin's. For improvement proposals, again discussions occur off-chain. Although the Ethereum community use social media to hold open discussions and provide feedback on improvement proposals, there again is no formal on-chain voting process. The final decision on implementations rests with the core development team, and ultimately the validators themselves must decide to accept or reject the change. The wider holders of Ethereum have no on-chain governance mechanism and therefore no control over the direction of the protocol. Vitalik himself openly discusses the fact that Ethereum doesn't want decentralized governance. I've linked a reference to this in the description. Despite this, Vitalik acknowledges the power of governance in blockchain. Speaking with Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong, Vitalik famously stated that the blockchains with the most potential to flip or kill Ethereum will not be the clones, but the ones prepared to carve out their own identity, specifically mentioning governance, upgradability, formal verification, and zero-knowledge technology. It seems he's somewhat describing Cardano. I'm paraphrasing a little, but Vitalik stated that the ones that do something unique and interesting that the Ethereum community is not willing to do, for example having a base layer with governance that does things like major protocol upgrades and throw the kitchen sink at a big governance blockchain, or something interesting with formal verification, referencing that these are the type of chains he envisions that will be most successful in rivaling Ethereum's network effect. While Vitalik acknowledges the power of governance in blockchain, he's openly of the opinion that it's too difficult to ensure it's done properly. This points to Ethereum not having the execution capacity or enough research to ensure that governance could be implemented safely. It requires a very specific vision and approach to prepare a blockchain for such a seismic shift. You could say that he's missing a Charles in this respect. Governance done properly requires a beautiful vision and an extremely considered approach to the development of its architecture and community that surrounds it. It seems Vitalik has taken the path of least resistance for Ethereum, while over the years indirectly acknowledging the design choices of Cardano in the open, yet under the disguise that they are somehow new frontiers of blockchain technology. There are numerous examples of this, like Ethereum's move to proof of stake, and most recently, his comments surrounding the importance of decentralizing what he refers to as solo stakers, something Cardano calls liquid staking. While Vitalik rarely acknowledges Cardano directly, he certainly describes it in an extremely positive light. So this leads us to Cardano. With the recent success of the Chang hard fork, on-chain governance capabilities have now been introduced to the blockchain as detailed in SIP 1694, which I've linked in the description. Cardano's version of on-chain governance represents a significantly more decentralized, ultra-inclusive model when compared to the more centralized and user-limiting approaches used by Bitcoin and Ethereum. While the framework put forward for its minimum viable governance solution is far more detailed or evolved when compared to that of what Satoshi described in the Bitcoin whitepaper, it can be observed that Cardano is attempting to achieve something like what he envisioned. Before the Chang hard fork, Cardano's SIPs or Cardano Improvement Proposal process was similar to Bitcoin and Ethereum's model in as much as there were no formal on-chain voting mechanisms that would enable the community or ADA holders to accept or reject their implementation. With Chang introducing governance capabilities, now all ADA withdrawals from the treasury, the changing of protocol parameters and initiation of a hard fork require a vote to be made on-chain. Even in the scenario where all stake pool operators could be persuaded to install a new version of the node, triggering a hard fork would always require an on-chain vote. This means that moving forward, all ADA holders have control over major protocol changes. This is an extremely egalitarian approach to governance as it decentralizes the decision-making process, empowering the entire community to shape the future of the network and promotes a much fairer distribution of power. This is the first critical characteristic you should consider. Cardano's 3 founding entities, in the burning of the Genesis keys, have now given up significant power of the blockchain in the name of decentralization, fulfilling the promise of the original roadmap, and with a view to unlock the true potential of the entire Cardano network. Find an example where people are happy or at least willing to give up power, especially in the cryptocurrency space. On Cardano, it is now possible to introduce community voting on which SIPs should be implemented or funded by utilizing the info governance action at the Cardano GovTool platform. We can consider staking on Cardano as the modern form of mining that's accessible to everyone, not a select few, from both a technical and economic perspective. The point is, just how most ADA holders are already or can very easily become stakers, in Cardano's governance model, each ADA holder has the option to vote directly, become a D-Rep themselves, or choose to delegate the decision-making power to a D-Rep of their choice, all from the comfort of their wallet in a few simple clicks, which can be freely changed at any time. This means Cardano is now not only decentralized in terms of block production, but also in terms of project management. Now anyone from the founding entities, independent development teams to individual ADA holders can put forward initiatives, proposals or changes to be implemented, and their acceptance ultimately lies with the community or all ADA holders via true on-chain voting. This is the ultimate utility. Owning ADA now means owning the rights to contribute, vote and steer the blockchain's evolution. Cardano's governance model goes deep, and the attention to detail is what gives it so much potential. The first critical aspect is the Cardano Constitution, a founding document that brings together the community's discussions and puts them into a text as a set of rules, principles or guardrails to abide by in order to maintain the sustainability of the Cardano network. This document will eventually be ratified on-chain through a final community vote. The Constitution outlines all the governance mechanisms, institutions, governance bodies and responsibilities of all the various governance stakeholders in the Cardano ecosystem, such as the delegate representatives or D-Reps and stake pool operators. Currently, an interim constitution is in place to keep the blockchain safe and secure during the transition phase of 2024. This was crafted by the Cardano Civics Committee and external experts. Currently, there are 63 open constitutional workshops that span 50 countries working on the Cardano Constitution. This global process is now engaging the rest of the Cardano community into drafting the final constitution. The workshops are specifically designed to bring together community members to feed into the drafting of the final document that will cement the rules and principles that will govern and underpin its governance model. The road to the final constitution will be as a result of a year-long process of formal discussions and consultations taking us from the interim constitution to draft constitution that will then be made final, put forward by the Cardano community and voted for on-chain. I've linked the interim constitution below for reference. So what exactly safeguards this constitution? Well, Cardano utilizes a constitutional committee who are held responsible to adhere to the constitution and approve proposals in accordance to it at all times in order to ensure that it's always respected. This means the committee's role is to only vote on the constitutionality of governance actions and can be replaced if they overstep this boundary. Whilst they can vote no to reject governance actions, they should only do so when a conflict to the constitution is identified. For example, the committee could reject proposals if they do not adhere to the criteria set out in the yearly budget. This committee doesn't have overarching power over D-Reps, and in fact may have less, in as much as the committee members can be replaced by D-Reps at any time, and D-Rep votes are also required to approve every governance action. The establishment of this committee is to help safeguard the implementation of a new governance framework. As soon as the framework is live or active on chain, without a constitutional committee, Cardano would require sufficient D-Reps so that the system did not rely solely on staple operator votes. As initial participation cannot be predicted, the constitutional committee comes into play to make sure that the system can transition from its current state into fully decentralized governance over a period of time. Long term, this committee could play a key advisory role in governance decisions as elected representatives. Ultimately, the Constitution and Committee provides a fundamental guardrail to keep the protocol safe. So what about D-Reps? Cardano's decentralized governance structure encourages wide-scale participation via true liquid and representative democracy. This opens the door for anyone to become a D-Rep or delegated representative. All users now have the potential to support Cardano and drive the ecosystem forward, rather than only a selected few. You could think of Cardano D-Reps as the network's politicians that can work independently or even form parties, market their expertise, vision, or values, increase their voting power via ADA delegation, and effect meaningful change voting on behalf of the sub-communities they represent. This means ADA holders have the choice to place confidence in more technically skilled individuals or thought leaders to ensure voting on more complex proposals is considered and effective. This also empowers smaller delegators to contribute to a larger voting power, enabling them to participate in the decision-making process that also suits their own preferences. D-Reps will also be able to withdraw from the treasury based on a true on-chain vote. These characteristics separates Cardano's governance model from the real-world democracy we're accustomed to. After electing a government, you have little control over specific proposals or funding. Cardano is attempting a hybrid model, utilizing a more direct democracy approach. D-Reps will be made up of individual community members, thought leaders, development teams, and established projects. These D-Reps could also go on to form institutions, which we'll come to in a moment. Most importantly, it's a decentralized system, so anyone can become a D-Rep. A crucial factor is being a liquid democracy where users can vote hire or fire with their wallet by simply undelegating from the D-Rep, ensures that they can actually be held accountable for their actions, and importantly, introduces further control for the voters in the network. Cardano is the first blockchain to implement a type of decentralized governance that utilizes liquid democracy, constitutional representation, and institutional support. While the term institution is often thought of in a negative sense, in the context of the Cardano ecosystem, institution refers to various entities that are made up of experienced community members and development teams with expertise to support specific needs of the Cardano blockchain. Institutions can provide structure to evolving the governance model while also contributing to the ongoing development and adoption of the blockchain. One of Cardano's core strengths is the number and quality of the institutions that already exist in the ecosystem. There are many examples of this: Intersect, Pragma, the Cardano Foundation, IOG, Emergo, Cardano Guild, the DeFi Alliance, and many more development teams, companies, and projects that we can consider as Cardano institutions. As the system is decentralized, technically anyone can form an institution on Cardano. This could be self-funded or even established through community funding via the treasury. Being an open market, nothing prevents anyone from forming an institution and go about freely developing services, products, and providing vital guidance or support for the wider ecosystem. If the community deems an institution no longer necessary, then it would be dissolved. If it lacks a sustainable operating budget, doesn't receive treasury funding, and fails to capture community support for its initiatives, then it would naturally cease to exist. This is how institutions on Cardano are incentivized to remain transparent and held accountable for their actions. However, having many institutions that form around the protocol is a feature, not a bug, and should be viewed in a positive light. They will play a pivotal role in encouraging community contribution and facilitating important discussions, development paths, and innovation that feeds into the consensus-driven advancement of the Cardano blockchain. Institutions can also register as D-Reps, delegate to a D-Rep of their choice, or retain their own voting power. If there are inefficiencies within various institutions, then they can be smoothed out by other institutions, which enables the decentralization of innovation. A great example of this is Aiken. Remember, IOG didn't come up with this. Aiken is not Haskell-based, but has become one of the most widely used and developer-friendly programming languages on Cardano. Without other companies, dev teams, or institutions, maybe Aiken wouldn't have come to fruition. Having a variety of institutions, small or large, that differ in terms of purpose, expertise and capabilities fosters more innovation, more decentralized development, and ultimately a greater chance of success than having to rely on only the 3 founding entities, or at the other end of the spectrum, no institutions at all, where you would have a Wild West situation where governance could potentially stun or destroy the blockchain. While institutions form an important part of Cardano's governance framework, ultimately it's the Cardano community of stake-pool operators, D-Reps, constitutional committee and individual users in a collaborative effort that have control over the decision-making process. Think of it as a hybrid system of institutions and user democracy. In the early stages of governance, founding entities and larger institutions with their greater expertise and resources could exercise their full voting power to prevent adversarial, unrealistic or problematic proposals from being advanced while governance matures, which is another important guardrail. You could argue this centralizes some of the decision making and could prevent even good proposals from going through, but they have voting power and could exercise it. In fact, I would expect them to do so in order to ensure that Cardano lands safely into governance. There are many examples, Polkadot being one of them, who have demonstrated the dangers of not taking a slower, iterative approach to implementing governance in decentralized blockchain networks. Above all, Cardano's minimum viable governance solution is just a starting point and open for extension, but crucially is designed to provide Cardano a parachute to land safely. Cardano's approach has been criticized for just copying the type of democratic system we already have in the real world, but the features and characteristics we have discussed must be considered. Initially, there will be more centralized elements because decentralized governance is so difficult to execute. It's better to pick a proven model that works in some capacity and evolve it. Cardano chose this model because it's proven to work, at least to some degree. The idea is to start from this model and evolve it through true decentralized governance and the power of the entire community. Cardano doesn't pretend to have all the answers, but is taking a shot at one of the most ambitious attempts, learning from existing models to find a balance between design by committee and extreme decentralization. When you consider Cardano's architecture, the foundational technology, upgradability, its sustainable treasury, the liquid staking model that translates perfectly into on-chain voting, the network of stake-pool operators and governance framework that incorporates institutions, D-Reps, a constitution, constitutional committee and all ADA holders, these are the characteristics of a blockchain with a greater vision than the rest of crypto. It's hard not to see how deliberate this all is, and is an opportunity we now need to grasp with both hands. Ultimately, the Cardano vision and approach to blockchain development, while it discouraged many actors from contributing initially, it also fostered a community of a different kind. It cultivated a smart community of adults in the room, which has given Cardano a great advantage in realizing a solid version of governance long term. Yes, it's a dangerous time and not going to be perfect from day one, but it has all the potential to achieve something great. It's a fundamental component to realize a network state. Ultimately, what Cardano is attempting to achieve with decentralized governance is to capture the wisdom of the crowds. Blockchains with more centralized models limit themselves in this respect, and therefore adoption is focused in very few jurisdictions. Without a decentralized, accessible and ultra-inclusive model, you'll never be able to scale globally. Decentralized governance of a widely distributed decentralized network means you can enter even the most remote areas, reaching far more countries and users in the process. In many respects, Cardano's governance model is achieving a form of governance that Satoshi envisioned for Bitcoin, but is far more decentralized, user-empowering, and innovation-enabling when compared to the models blockchains like Ethereum and Bitcoin currently employ today. If you see value in what the Cardano community is attempting to implement with governance and want to contribute, there hasn't been a better time to get up to speed and, importantly, get involved. To become a D-Rep or delegate your decision-making power, check out Cardano's Gov tool linked in the description, along with all other helpful governance sources. For now, keep it sapient, keep it blockchain, and keep it Cardano.